So I went on mouser.com and ordered up all of these caps. So here they are. Some bigger electrolytics. Now these always are much smaller in size than the original big cans that are in there. So I tend to end up doing tricky stuff of paralleling them, soldering them together, kind of jumping them and putting a zip tie on them maybe sometimes, and just however they fit in there. Usually on these magnavox chassis there's lots of room, so I'll probably end up gluing these under the chassis, or even just once they're soldered in, if they're holding themselves up, we'll leave it at that, and leave the can in place because it looks appropriate. I don't know. Sometimes I take the cans out and use that space because there's no room under the chassis. So anyways, here's all the caps. You can see, I mean, everything's laid out here as far as what's in these. Like I said, I'm going to be doing some paralleling on this. I tend to do that because I'm a stickler for just going kind of right to the value. And, you know, I guess it doesn't necessarily matter, but sometimes I'll just jump a tiny little cap onto the leads of another one, and then I'll be right where the way that Magnavox originally built it. So now that I've got all the capacitors, the next step, what I like to do at this step is actually take and go through this whole thing and clean it up. So we're going to get in here, and there's crap in there, dusty stuff, and I wiped off that one tube, but you see the other one's got all kinds of dust on them and everything. So now we're kind of into the job, and so this is what I'd call step one of the actual physical work here. And yeah, so we'll dust it all off. Quick advice on cleaning here. On these tubes, you've got all of this lettering on here like this, all the dust on the top. So we want to clean all the dust off, but you got to be careful when what you're wiping it with. You don't want to use any alcohol or something, then remove that in a second. You know, I just use paper towels to wipe off, or even your finger. You just kind of wipe it off, and then you want to get all your fingerprints off of the tube, all the oils and everything. So really just paper towel is the best thing to use, and avoid the paint. This Magnavox paint seems to be pretty hardy, this yellow stuff, but I've had there's some other tubes out there with white paint on them that'll literally just come off when you touch it. And for the cabinetry and all the amps, I use baby wipes. I like them really good for like the tuner faceplates and everything, because they don't have solvents in them. You know, and it's like a very light cleansing, just basically wet cleaning, but you can just pull one out, wipe it down, wipe it with a paper towel to dry it off, and then toss them all out. So it's quick and easy. For all of this dust and everything down in the bottom here, get a vacuum with a bristle, like a soft bristle attachment like that, and just go in here, get all that gunk out across it, and just be careful of the tubes and the amp chassis. We're going to pull these out so we can clean the amp chassis with baby wipes real carefully once we pull them out onto the bench. So for now, I'm just going to get all this dust out of my way, and then pull everything out and start cleaning. We're fairly cleaned up now, so I didn't really take every tube out and dust it. I just vacuumed around here to get so I don't breathe the crap when I'm unplugging this thing and pulling the amp chassis out. Okay, so before we pull these chassis out, there's wires everywhere. So wires, all back there. So we want to make sure that when we pull the plugs and stuff, we don't get things misaligned. Don't be too confident and think, oh yeah, no problem, it'll all just fit right back together, and I'm gonna, I'll remember. It's a hell of a lot easier to just use masking tape and a Sharpie. This plug is similar enough to this plug on the MPX unit here that I'm going to label this one amp, and I'll label that one MPX. With these individual wires, this is the input, and then there's another one over there that's an input to the MPX unit. And so I'll pull this and say, amp input right and amp input left. Same thing with all these back there. You could use the Sharpie and right on the chassis if you want, or you can stick a piece of tape on the chassis and reference it. If you don't want to be so specific, just call this one A and put an A right here and go all the way around through the whole unit and do it that way. Either way, that's going to save you a lot of trouble when you go to put it all back together. To pull these things out, it's simple. It's just these, usually each one has about 4 of these little hex head screws, wood screws, go straight into the wood. And so we'll get the wrench and pull these bad boys out of here, get them on the bench. It's out, everything's labeled, all the blue tape everywhere. I take the bolts when they come, and when they come out, put them right back in the same holes. Then you don't lose them, you know exactly where they go. This thing's got this cool little slider clip, so I didn't even have to remove the ones in the back. Dust everywhere, so I'm going to vacuum a little more and probably get some of those baby wipes or paper towels in the back, get all the crevices. Then I'll pull the MPX unit. The MPX is out, got everything labeled again, found some very strange looking white dust underneath the MPX. Same there. Now, I don't think this is asbestos, but I have heard of asbestos mats being used. I don't know why one would go under a tuner, but anyways, I've heard of them being used in old radios and stuff, but we're talking 1940s, not 60s. Either way, asbestos is generally safe unless you breathe it, so I'll just get it wet. That's the answer. So I'll get out my baby wipes and wipe this crap off of everything. Maybe put some gloves on so I feel a little bit better about myself. We'll clean it up, put this on the bench, and then we'll pull the tuner. That's next. To pull the tuner out, we got to take the knobs off. So I turned them all to the left here, so every one of them is all the way maxed out to one direction. And then I'm going to take a picture of that, so when I put them back on, I know exactly where they go. Maybe that's just me being anal or whatever, but because you can always figure it out on these. But so yeah, those got to come off first, and then we'll take the bolts off the back. Is now gutted, so unfortunately this is how a lot of these console stereos end up looking right before they go off to their death out in somebody's backyard, and chopped up, thrown in wood piles and to the dump, etc. Because of the value of the amp. Now, I guess fortunately that's not the case. Now that we're gutted completely, I'll do some more cleaning, because this is a cleaning game until we get to putting it all back together. There's dust and stuff all over here. The record changer is going to come out, so I'll probably clean the cabinet when I do that. I do the record changers last. I think some people do them first. Who knows? So probably some more vacuuming and wiping and stuff in here. Sadly, when I was vacuuming, I nicked this piece of paper here. And because I am just weird or what, a masochist, I don't know. But I'm going to take this piece here that I nicked off, and I'm going to glue all that back down and maybe put a piece of that clear packing tape stuff on there to try to preserve that piece of paper in there. It's seen better days. And then I, of course, hit it. It's brittle as hell right now. So I'm going to fix that. That was my problem. I did that. So now everything is out, and here we are on the bench. That's all 3 pieces that came from the unit, the MPX, the amp, and the tuner. Everything's labeled, got all my tags, so it's going to go back together well. So we're going to do more cleaning. Come through here and get all this stuff off. I like to use baby wipes on all that, and, paper towels, same thing here. On this tuner faceplate, I get a little crazy trying to clean these things. You got to be real careful. That white paint might just come right off. You could crack the glass. I've never done that, but don't take the glass out. Just leave it in place and do your best with Q-tips and really nothing else. You probably don't want to use any solvents or anything. In this case, it looks like these letters are on the underside, so that's good, because hopefully I can just wipe. Yeah, see, if I can clean that crap off of there from the surface, I could probably get it nice and clean, and it'll look good enough when it goes back together. And hopefully I don't find something I need to get crazy about with the Q-tip underneath, because I could just end up wiping this stuff off. Unfortunately, some units have the paint on the outside. You don't realize it until the moment you go to clean it, and then it's too late. So there's also some bulbs in here, and I didn't actually check these bulbs. I'm probably going to do the recap, put everything back together, get it fired up, and if I see a bulb out, I'll have to replace it, which means I'll probably end up powering up some things on the bench, or maybe I'll just set up a power supply and just energize those bulbs and test them that way, or just look at them, I guess, look at the filaments. I do have plenty of replacement bulbs. I think they're the really common GE pinball machine bulb, GE42 or something like that. So yeah, more cleaning, that's the next step. Okay, everything's wiped down, clean and shiny. I was able to wipe the surface of the glass off. I didn't get underneath the glass at all. It's got a few little specks, but I'm not going to be stressed about it. All of this stuff is all cleaned up. Wipe the tubes off gently, just the tops with paper towel, and then I use baby wipes on everything else. So now it's safety lesson time. Capacitors are like batteries, and they hold a charge. They can hold a DC charge up to whatever they're rated at. In this case, 350 volts and 40 microfarads. Either way, we don't, even on a small one, you don't want to get zapped at all. The really big ones, like, you know, some bigger than these, if you connect both sides of your hands, one from each hand, if you connect from the hot of the capacitor to the ground, the charge, the entire current that's stored in the capacitor basically shoots down one arm and across the other, which goes right across your heart and can kill you. So if you don't want to die, then you need to know how to safely discharge a capacitor and or test it for a charge. The way to discharge it, you can look that up, but basically you're using a resistor. But the way to test it is get a voltmeter. This one here is automatic, so it runs, right now it's reading negative 17.5 millivolts. Because it's got the auto feature, it kind of drifts a little bit at the 0 point. It's basically zero right now. It's not connected, so there really isn't voltage on there. But we're going to flip it over and we're going to probe a few of the caps on the back to make sure there's no charge in here. So because we're about to start clipping leads or unsoldering leads and soldering in new capacitors. Before we do that, we'll make sure it's discharged. So the main capacitor is here, the big can. That's the scariest one. So I'm just going to probe one end of it to the other. I see nothing on my meter. Again, nothing there, nothing there. And then we'll take the same one and probe it to ground. So ground, nothing there, nothing, nothing, nothing. Now again, my meter that entire time read these negative voltages, which is the same thing as reading a 0 on this meter. If we would have seen that actually go up to readable DC voltage, we would have wanted to put a resistor between the ground of the chassis and that part of the capacitor. These four terminal, this can capacitor is actually four separate capacitors in one. This is the ground, or the negative side. It's right on the outside of that can, soldered to the chassis, and these are all four positive terminals. They're referenced on the side of the can with little symbols on the bottom. We'll get into that later when we go to replace it. So now taking the leads again, and I'm going to probe across these are capacitors as well, and those are going to be replaced in this process. These disc capacitors will be left alone. So I mean, we can check that again. Nothing, 0. Not that that would have read anything, because that was a 0.01 microfarad, but nothing there, nothing, nothing, and nothing. Okay, great, safe. Now I can stick my fingers in this amplifier, see, and look at that. I didn't get